In the 1970s, Chinese action cinema didn't just grow, it exploded. A young man named Bruce Lee walked onto a screen and rewired the global imagination. Shaw Brothers Studio cranked out masterpiece after masterpiece from their legendary Clearwater Bay lot. And a new generation of directors, choreographers, and actors were quietly inventing the visual language of action cinema that the entire world would eventually speak. And these are the top 20 Chinese action films of the 1970s. To understand why the 1970s matters so much, you need to understand the context. The decade opened with Bruce Lee, a Hong Kong-born martial artist who had spent years in Hollywood trying to break through a system that wasn't ready for him. He came home, he made films on his own terms, and within 2 years, he was the most famous action star on the planet. But Bruce Lee was only one part of the story. While Lee was redefining what a martial arts star could be, Shaw Brothers Studio was operating at full industrial capacity, producing dozens of films a year under directors like Chang Che, Liu Chialiang, and Chu Yuan. These films built an entire universe of kung fu storytelling, Shaolin temples, secret techniques, revenge missions, and brotherhood forged in combat. And at the very end of the decade, a new wave arrived. Jackie Chan, initially marketed as the next Bruce Lee and failing at it, found his own voice, comedic, physical, vulnerable, human. And with films like Drunken Master and Snake in the Eagle's Shadow, he launched a revolution of his own. 3 distinct forces, 1 extraordinary decade, 20 films that represent the best of it all. We're ranking based on cinematic quality, cultural impact, action choreography, historical influence, and lasting legacy. Let's count them down, starting at number 20. Number 20. The Flying Guillotine, 1975. Director Ho Meng-hua, Shaw Brothers. Starring Shen Quan-tai. Opening our countdown at number 20, a film remembered above all else for one thing, the most terrifying weapon in kung fu cinema history. The Flying Guillotine is a hat-shaped blade attached to a chain, thrown at a victim's head and retracted, decapitating them cleanly from a distance. It sounds absurd. On screen, it is absolutely horrifying. Shen Quan-tai plays Ma Teng, an imperial guard who grows a conscience after witnessing the flying guillotine used to execute innocent people on the emperor's paranoid orders. Director Ho Meng-hua uses the guillotine brilliantly as a weapon of dread. The horror is not just in the kills, but in the anticipation. How do you fight something you cannot deflect with a sword or block with your hands? The film's influence reached far beyond China. Quentin Tarantino has cited it as an inspiration. The weapon itself appeared in sequels, parodies, and homages across decades. At number 20, The Flying Guillotine earns its place as one of the most conceptually original films of the entire decade. Number 19, Heroes 2, 1974. Director Chang Che, Shaw Brothers. Starring Alexander Fu Sheng, Chen Quan-tai, Wang Lung Wei. At number 19, one of Chang Che's most entertaining films of the mid-70s and a showcase for 2 of Shaw Brothers' brightest stars. Alexander Fu Sheng plays Fong Sai-yuk, the young, cocky, enormously talented Shaolin disciple who would become one of the most beloved characters in Chinese martial arts folklore. Chen Quan-tai is his elder counterpart Hong Hei-kwon, more grounded, more disciplined, and the perfect foil for Fu Sheng's irrepressible energy. Wang Lung Wei, one of Shaw Brothers' most reliable villains, brings menace as the Qing dynasty antagonist. The story follows both heroes in the aftermath of the destruction of the Shaolin Temple, survivors trying to rebuild their lives and their fighting traditions while hunted by Qing forces. What makes Heroes 2 special is the chemistry between Fu Sheng and Chen Quan-tai. Their styles are genuinely different, fast and flashy versus powerful and grounded, and Chang Che is smart enough to let those contrasts drive both the drama and the fight sequences. Alexander Fu Sheng in particular is a revelation here. Charismatic, physically gifted, and naturally funny, you can already see the star he was becoming. Tragically, he would die in a car accident in 1983 at just 28 years old, taking with him one of the most promising careers in Hong Kong cinema. Heroes 2 stands as one of his finest early performances. Number 18, Dirty Ho, 1979. Director, Lau Kar-leong, Shaw Brothers. Starring, Gordon Liu and Wang Yu. At number 18, arguably the most inventive film on this entire list, Gordon Liu plays an undercover Qing prince who must teach martial arts to a young thief, played with irrepressible energy by Wang Yu, without ever revealing his true identity or abilities. The central conceit of Dirty Ho is one of the most brilliantly original in all of Kung Fu cinema. Gordon Liu's character must fight and defeat multiple opponents while appearing not to fight at all, disguising his martial arts within everyday gestures, antique appreciation, even a wine-tasting ceremony. Combat hidden in plain sight. Director Lau Kar-leong, himself a genuine martial arts master and one of the greatest action choreographers in film history, designed these sequences with extraordinary ingenuity. Every fight is essentially a magic trick, and the pleasure is watching how he pulls it off each time. This is Lau Kar-leong operating with full creative freedom, and the result is a film unlike anything else in the decade. At number 18, Dirty Ho rewards anyone patient enough to seek it out. Number 17, The Five Shaolin Masters, 1974. Director, Chong Che, Shaw Brothers. Starring David Jiang, Ti Long, Alexander Fu Sheng, Meng Fei, and Chi Quan Chun. At number 17, Chong Che assembles his greatest ensemble cast for one of the defining Shaolin films of the decade. 5 survivors of the Shaolin Temple's destruction, played by the cream of Shaw Brothers talent, David Jiang, Ti Long, Alexander Fu Sheng, Meng Fei, and Chi Quan Chun, each escape separately, train in secret, and reunite for a final reckoning against the Qing forces that destroyed their home. 5 heroes, 5 different fighting styles, 1 mission. What Chong Che achieves here is remarkable. He gives each of his 5 leads distinct personalities, distinct martial arts identities, and distinct character arcs without the film ever losing its momentum. Each training sequence is designed to showcase a specific style, and the final battle is a genuinely satisfying payoff to everything built before it. The 5 Shaolin Masters also cemented the historical mythology of the 5 Elders of Shaolin, a story that would be told and retold in Chinese action cinema for decades to come, from the Shaw Brothers era all the way through to modern wuxia television. This is one of the definitive versions of that legend. Number 16, The Brave Archer, 1977. Director, Chong Che, Shaw Brothers. Starring, Alexander Fu Sheng, Tian Niu, Danny Lee, and Philip Kwok. At number 16, Chinese action cinema meets its greatest literary tradition. The Brave Archer is an adaptation of Jin Young's legendary novel, The Legend of the Condor Heroes, one of the most beloved works in all of Chinese literature. Alexander Fu Sheng plays Guo Jing, a humble, good-natured young man who must master martial arts and navigate a world of competing factions, deadly secrets, and impossible loyalties. Tian Niu is warm and spirited as Huang Rong, while Danny Lee and Philip Kwok bring strong support to a rich ensemble. Jin Young's novels are to Chinese action culture what Tolkien is to Western fantasy, foundational, beloved, endlessly adapted, and Chong Che captures the epic scope of the source material admirably, building a world that feels genuinely vast and populated. The Brave Archer spawned 3 sequels, and its influence on Chinese wuxia storytelling continues to this day. The story has been adapted for television more than a dozen times across multiple decades, most recently in 2025. But this 1977 film was the first major cinematic treatment of the legend, and Alexander Fu Sheng's guileless, earnest performance as Guo Jing remains one of the most charming in the entire Shaw Brothers catalog. Number 15. The Magic Blade, 1976. Director Chu Yuan, Shaw Brothers. Starring Ti Leung, Lo Li-A, Ku Feng, and Qing Li. At number 15, the most stylish and atmospheric wuxia film of the decade. Ti Leung plays Fu Heng Sui, a wandering swordsman carrying the legendary magic blade, hunted by every ambitious warrior in the martial world who wants it. Lo Li-A is magnetic as Yan Nanfei, an assassin and rival who may be the only man alive as deadly as Fu Heng Sui himself. Ku Feng brings his signature menace to the role of the film's primary villain. Director Chu Yuan, who would become the definitive adapter of Jin Yong and Gu Long's wuxia novels throughout the late 70s, creates a world here that feels genuinely different from anything else Shaw Brothers was producing. Darker, more dreamlike, more visually inventive. Where Chang Che gave us raw power and Lau Kar-leong gave us technical mastery, Chu Yuan gave us atmosphere and mood. The Magic Blade feels like a wuxia film shot through a noir lens, shadowy, paranoid, and gorgeous to look at. Ti Leung is exceptional, cool and controlled on the surface, with depths of melancholy underneath. This is one of his very best performances of the decade, and one of the most compelling films in the entire Shaw Brothers library. Number 14. The Boxer from Shantung, 1972. Director Chang Che and Pao Shui Li. Shaw Brothers. Starring Chan Quan Tai, David Jiang, Qing Li. At number 14 is one of the great rise and fall stories in Kung Fu cinema. Chan Quan Tai delivers a career-defining performance as Ma Yong-sen, a poor laborer from Shantung who arrives in Shanghai with nothing but his fists and his ambition, and claws his way up through the brutal criminal underworld to become the most feared fighter in the city. David Jiang provides strong support as a rival who becomes an unlikely ally. The Boxer from Shantung builds slowly and deliberately. This is a film about character as much as combat, but when the violence arrives, it arrives with devastating force. The climactic battle sequence, in which Ma Yong-sen fights off wave after wave of enemies with a hatchet embedded in his stomach, refusing to fall, is one of the most extraordinary action sequences in 1970s cinema. Brutal, operatic, and genuinely moving. It's the kind of finale that stays with you for days. Chang Che later remade this story as Shanghai 13 in 1984, and the legend of Ma Yong-sen inspired Donnie Yen's ambitious 2010 film, Legend of the Fist, demonstrating how powerfully this character has resonated across decades of Chinese action cinema. Number 13. Heroes of the East, 1978. Director Lau Kar-leong, Shaw Brothers. Starring Gordon Liu, Yuka Mizuno, Yasuaki Kurata. At number 13, one of the most original and entertaining concept films of the decade. Gordon Liu plays a Chinese man who marries a Japanese woman, played by Yuka Mizuno, only for their marriage to fracture over a heated debate about whether Chinese kung fu or Japanese martial arts is superior. When his wife returns to Japan, her country's greatest martial arts masters, representing ninjutsu, kendo, karate, and more, arrive one by one to fight him on her behalf. Yasuaki Kurata, a genuine Japanese martial arts practitioner, is magnetic as the primary Japanese challenger. What makes Heroes of the East genuinely remarkable is its tone. This could easily have been a jingoistic film about Chinese superiority. Instead, Lau Kar-leong makes something far more interesting, a film that respects both traditions equally, treating each martial art as a genuine discipline worthy of serious treatment. Every fight is essentially a seminar in comparative martial arts, and Lau Kar-leong's choreography is detailed enough to make the stylistic differences between each discipline feel authentically distinct. Gordon Liu has never been more likable, and the film builds to a final confrontation that is both thrilling and surprisingly warm-hearted. Number 12. Executioners from Shaolin, 1977. Director Lau Gar-leung, Shaw Brothers. Starring Chen Quan-tai, Lo Lie, Lily Lee, Gordon Liu. At number 12, Lau Gar-leung delivers one of the great generational revenge stories in kung fu cinema. Chen Quan-tai plays Hong Si-guan, a Shaolin survivor who dedicates his life to defeating the legendary villain Pai Mei, played with otherworldly menace by Lo Lie. The problem? Pai Mei is essentially invincible. His iron body technique renders him immune to tiger-style kung fu, Hong's specialty. When Hong fails and dies, his son must take up the mission, this time training in crane style to find the weakness in Pai Mei's defenses. Lily Lee is exceptional as Hong's wife, and a young Gordon Liu appears in a supporting role that hints at his stardom to come. The genius of this film is its structure, a father's failure becoming a son's destiny. Lau Gar-leung uses the contrasting philosophies of tiger-style and crane-style kung fu as a genuine dramatic metaphor. Brute strength alone is not enough. You must find the gap. The character of Pai Mei, white-haired, eyebrow-stroking, utterly lethal, became one of the most iconic villains in martial arts cinema history. Quentin Tarantino brought him back decades later in Kill Bill Volume 2, played by Gordon Liu himself, a glorious full-circle moment honoring the Shaw Brothers' legacy. Number 11. Fearless Hyena, 1979. Director, Jackie Chan. Low-Way Motion Picture. Starring Jackie Chan, James Tien, Yen Shiquan. Jackie Chan steps behind the camera for the first time, and the results are extraordinary. Jackie Chan plays Xing Lung, a young man living quietly with his grandfather, forbidden from using his exceptional kung fu skills. When his grandfather is murdered by a ruthless Qing commander, played with cold efficiency by Yen Shiquan, Xing Lung must abandon all restraint and unleash everything he has. James Tien provides solid support as an early mentor figure. Fearless Hyena is significant for multiple reasons. First, it is Jackie Chan's directorial debut, and already you can see his instincts for comedy, timing, and physical storytelling operating at a high level. The training sequences are inventive and funny in ways that feel distinctly Jackie. Second, the emotional kung fu sequence in this film, where Chan's character learns to channel specific emotions into his fighting style, is one of the most creative fight concepts of the entire decade. Funny, surprising, and genuinely original. Fearless Hyena was a massive box office hit in Hong Kong. It even outgrossed Drunken Master, which tells you everything about Jackie Chan's commercial power by the close of the 1970s.
I can't take it. I'm going to the toilet.
Number 10. The Chinese Boxer, 1970. Director, Jimmy Wong Yu, Shaw Brothers. Starring Jimmy Wong Yu, Lo Lie. This is the film that arguably started it all. Jimmy Wong Yu, the one-armed swordsman himself, steps behind the camera for the first time and directs himself as a young martial artist who witnesses his school destroyed and his master killed by a gang of Japanese fighters led by the brutal Lo Lie. What follows is a methodical, single-minded revenge mission. The Chinese Boxer holds a unique place in history. Many film scholars credit it as the first modern kung fu film, the first to center the story entirely on bare-handed combat rather than weapons, the first to frame Chinese martial arts as a source of national pride and identity, and the first to establish the revenge-driven training montage structure that would define the genre for decades. The production values are rough by later standards, and the choreography lacks the sophistication of Lau Gar-leung's work later in the decade. But without the Chinese Boxer clearing the path, none of the films above it on this list exist in the same form. Five Fingers of Death took this template to the world. Bruce Lee electrified it. Shaw Brothers industrialized it. But Jimmy Wong Yu built the foundation. At number 10, history demands his recognition. Number 9. Five Deadly Venoms, 1978. Director Chang Che, Shaw Brothers. Starring Chang Sheng, Philip Kwok, Lo Mang, Lu Feng, Sun Qian, and Wei Pai. This film is one of the most influential ensemble action films ever made. A dying kung fu master sends his final student on a mission to find his 5 former students, known only by their fighting styles: the centipede, the snake, the scorpion, the lizard, and the toad. Some may be using their skills for evil, some may be good, and some fight in combinations no single style can defeat. The ensemble, Philip Kwok, Lo Mang, Lu Feng, Chiang Sheng, and Sun Qian, became known in Hong Kong cinema as the Venom Mob, one of the most beloved acting ensembles of the Shaw Brothers era. What Chang Che does brilliantly here is construct the film as an action mystery. You don't know who is good or evil until the pieces click into place, and the final confrontations are designed with genuine strategic ingenuity. Which style defeats which? What combination is truly unbeatable? The Venom Mob's influence reached far beyond Chinese cinema. The Wu-Tang Clan built their entire mythology around the 5 deadly venoms aesthetic. RZA has cited this film as one of the foundational inspirations for the group. That is a cultural reach that few martial arts films can match. Number 8. 5 Fingers of Death, Kickboxer, 1972. Director Chang Chong-ho, Shaw Brothers. Starring Lo Lie, Wang Ping, Tian Feng. The film that opened the Western world's eyes to Chinese martial arts cinema. Lo Lie plays a dedicated martial arts student who travels to study under a great master, masters the legendary Iron Fist technique, and must use it to defend his school against a rival clan's increasingly violent provocations. Wang Ping is affecting as the master's daughter, and Tian Feng brings authority as the wise but threatened Sifu. 5 Fingers of Death, released in the United States in March 1973 as Kickboxer, became a phenomenon. It was the first kung fu film to crack the American top 10 at the box office, paving the way for everything that followed, including the American release of Bruce Lee's films just months later. The film's most iconic moment, Lo Lie's hands glowing red as he activates the Iron Fist, became one of the most recognizable images in martial arts cinema. Quentin Tarantino sampled the film's music cue in Kill Bill. American audiences who had never seen a martial arts film were suddenly buying tickets by the millions. Without 5 Fingers of Death, the global kung fu craze of the 1970s unfolds very differently. This is the film that kicked the door open. Number 7. Snake in the Eagle's Shadow, 1978. Director Yuen Wu Ping, Seasonal Film Corporation. Starring Jackie Chan, Yuan Xiaotian, Huang Zhangli. Jackie Chan plays as a bullied, clumsy student at a kung fu school where he does all the chores and gets none of the respect. When he accidentally befriends an old beggar, Yuan Xiaotian, playing a wandering master of snake-style kung fu with extraordinary warmth and comic genius, his life changes completely. The villain threatening them both is Huang Zhangli, one of the most genuinely fearsome kickers in Hong Kong action cinema. Finally, this was the film where Jackie Chan became the real Jackie Chan. Before Snake in the Eagle's Shadow, Jackie Chan had been marketed as the next Bruce Lee, and it wasn't working. He was trying to be something he wasn't. Director Yuen Wu Ping saw something different in Chan, a natural comedian with extraordinary physical gifts, and built this film entirely around that identity. The result was revelatory. For the first time, audiences saw a kung fu hero who was funny, fallible, and human, who got hit, who struggled, who learned through humiliation as much as training. The final fight, where Jackie improvises a new style by combining snake kung fu with his observation of a cat fighting a cobra, remains one of the most joyful action sequences of the decade. This film, and its immediate follow-up, Drunken Master, launched Jackie Chan into superstardom and permanently changed the direction of Hong Kong action cinema. Number 6. The 36th Chamber of Shaolin, 1978. Director Lau Kar-leung, Shaw Brothers. Starring Gordon Liu and Lo Li-a. At number 6, the greatest martial arts training film ever made, and one of the most purely satisfying action films of the entire decade. Gordon Liu plays Sun Tae, a young student radicalized by the Qing dynasty's brutal oppression of his people, who flees to the Shaolin temple after his family is massacred. What follows is the film's extraordinary centerpiece, Sun Tae's journey through the 35 chambers of Shaolin training, each designed to develop a specific aspect of martial arts mastery. Lau Kar-leung was himself trained in authentic Southern Chinese martial arts, and it shows in every frame. The training sequences in this film are not movie-making shorthand, they are genuine explorations of how martial arts mastery is built, one discipline at a time. Watching Sun Tae work through each chamber is one of the great pleasures in all of action cinema. Gordon Liu's physical transformation across the film is remarkable. He begins as a raw, desperate student and ends as something approaching a force of nature. The Wu-Tang Clan named their debut album after this film. RZA built an entire artistic philosophy around it. Its influence on hip-hop culture alone would secure its legendary status, but it would have been legendary anyway, purely on its own extraordinary cinematic merits. Number 5. Drunken Master, 1978. Director, Yuen Wu-ping, Seasonal Film Corporation. Starring Jackie Chan, Yuan Xiao-tian, Wang Zhongli. At number 5, if Snake in the Eagle Shadow was where Jackie Chan found himself, Drunken Master is where he became a legend. Jackie Chan plays the young Wang Fei-hung, one of the most beloved figures in Chinese martial arts folklore, portrayed here not as the dignified hero of legend, but as a mischievous, irresponsible troublemaker who gets himself into constant trouble with his father and the community. As punishment, he is sent to train under the Beggar So, the master of the legendary 8 Drunken Immortals style, played with absolute genius by Yuan Xiao-tian. Wang Zhongli returns as the most fearsome villain in Hong Kong action cinema, his leg speed genuinely breathtaking. Drunken Master works on every level simultaneously. It is hilarious. Chan and Yuan Xiao-tian's comic chemistry is among the best in Hong Kong film history. It is genuinely moving. The relationship between the lazy student and the demanding but caring master is written and performed with real warmth. And it is jaw-dropping as action. The drunken fist choreography that Yuen Wu-ping created for this film is some of the most inventive and physically demanding in the decade. The film was a colossal box office success across Asia and secured Jackie Chan's position as the defining action star of his generation. Drunken Master also returned the character of Wang Fei-hung to popular consciousness, a figure Jet Li would later make iconic again in Once Upon a Time in China, 1991, demonstrating how powerfully this legend resonates across eras. Number 4. Enter the Dragon, 1973. Director, Robert Klaus, Warner Bros., Concord. Starring Bruce Lee, John Saxon, Jim Kelly, Shi Qian, Robert Wall, Angela Mao. At number 4, the film that made the entire world stop and pay attention. Bruce Lee plays a Shaolin martial artist recruited by British intelligence to infiltrate the private island tournament of the criminal mastermind Mr. Han, played with suave menace by Shi Qian. Alongside him, John Saxon plays an American fighter with gambling debts, and Jim Kelly plays a black American martial artist fleeing corrupt police, 2 characters whose inclusion made Enter the Dragon one of the most genuinely diverse action films of its era. Robert Wall is memorably vicious as Han's chief enforcer, O'Hara. Enter the Dragon was the first Hollywood-Chinese co-production in martial arts cinema, a collaboration between Warner Bros. And Bruce Lee's own production company. It was designed to introduce Bruce Lee to the widest possible global audience, and it succeeded beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Tragically, Bruce Lee died 6 days before the film's release, never seeing the global phenomenon it became. Enter the Dragon grossed over $200 million on a budget of approximately $850,000, one of the most profitable films in history relative to its cost. The Hall of Mirrors finale remains one of the great action sequences in cinema history. Lee's physicality, the speed, the precision, the barely contained power is simply unlike anything else on screen before or since. Enter the Dragon didn't just introduce the world to Bruce Lee, it introduced the world to Chinese martial arts as cinema. Everything that followed, every kung fu film, every martial arts action movie, every Hollywood actor who trained in martial arts for a role exists in the shadow of this film. Number 3. The Way of the Dragon, 1972. Director, Bruce Lee, Concord Production. Starring Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, Nora Miao, Robert Wall. At number 3, the film where Bruce Lee took complete creative control, writing, directing, producing, and starring, and delivered something extraordinary. Bruce Lee plays as a simple, slightly awkward man from Hong Kong who travels to Rome to help a friend's restaurant being pressured by local gangsters. Nora Miao is charming as the restaurant owner, Robert Wall menacing as one of the hired fighters. And then there is Chuck Norris, playing the ultimate hired gun brought in to end Bruce Lee once and for all. The final confrontation between Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris in the Roman Colosseum is one of the most iconic fight sequences in the history of cinema. Two genuine martial arts masters, Lee with his Jeet Kune Do and Norris with his Tang Soo Do, going at each other in the ruins of the ancient world. As a director, Lee showed instincts that suggested a remarkable filmmaking career lay ahead. It was not to be, but The Way of the Dragon stands as testament to what he was capable of. Number 2. Fist of Fury, 1972. Director, Lo Wei, Golden Harvest. Starring Bruce Lee, Nora Miao, James Teen, and Robert Baker. At number 2, Bruce Lee at his most furious, his most political, and arguably his most powerful. Bruce Lee plays Chen Zhen, a student of the legendary martial artist Wo Yuan Jia, who returns to Shanghai to find his master has been mysteriously murdered. The killers, agents of the Japanese dojo that has been humiliating the Chinese martial arts community, enforcing signs that read "No dogs and Chinese allowed." Nora Miao brings quiet strength as Lee's fiancé, James Teen provides grounding as a fellow student, and Robert Baker is physically imposing as the Japanese dojo's Russian hired fighter. Fist of Fury is Bruce Lee operating with barely controlled rage, and the result is electrifying. The scene where Chen Zhen walks into the Japanese dojo alone, destroys the sign, and then proceeds to dismantle every fighter in the building is one of the great cathartic action sequences in cinema history. The audience eruption in Hong Kong cinemas when that scene first played was, by all accounts, unlike anything seen before or since. The film carries genuine political weight. It is explicitly about colonialism, national dignity, and the rage of a people who have been told they're inferior. In 1972 Hong Kong, those themes landed with enormous force. The character of Chen Zhen became one of the most beloved in Chinese action cinema. Jet Li played him in Fist of Legend, 1994, widely considered one of the greatest martial arts films ever made. Donnie Yen played him in the 2010 television series Legend of the Fist. Each generation's greatest martial arts star has taken their turn with Chen Zhen because Bruce Lee created something here that resonates far beyond any single performance. At number 2, Fist of Fury stands as one of the defining action films of the 20th century. So what could possibly stand above it? Number 1. The Big Boss, 1971. Director, Lo Wei, Golden Harvest. Starring Bruce Lee, Maria Yi, James Tien, Han Ying-chi. At number 1, not the most polished film on this list, Not the most technically accomplished, not even the most famous, but the most important. Bruce Lee plays Cheng Chaoan, a young man from mainland China who travels to Thailand to work at an ice factory, sworn to his mother not to fight. Maria Yi brings warmth as his cousin's girlfriend. James Tien is strong in an early lead role before the film pivots fully to Lee, and Han Ying-chi, who also served as action choreographer, is terrifying as the factory boss's brutal enforcer. When Cheng discovers that the ice factory is a front for drug trafficking and that his friends are being murdered to keep the secret, his oath shatters, and the world first sees what Bruce Lee is truly capable of. The Big Boss was released in Hong Kong on October 3, 1971. It broke every box office record in Hong Kong history at that time. Audiences had never seen anything like Bruce Lee on screen before. The speed, the ferocity, the sheer physical magnetism. He wasn't just a great fighter on film, he was a force of nature that the camera seemed unable to fully contain. Within months, Bruce Lee was the most famous Chinese person on the planet. This matters because of what it meant beyond cinema. In 1971, Hong Kong was a British colony. China was closed to the world. Chinese people across Southeast Asia, across the diaspora, across the world, many of them lived in societies where they were marginalized, dismissed, looked down upon. And then, Bruce Lee appeared on screen, moving faster than anyone had ever moved, defeating everyone, unapologetically, defiantly Chinese, and the most extraordinary physical presence in the history of action cinema. The cultural impact was seismic, not just for Chinese audiences, for every marginalized community that saw themselves in his defiance. The Big Boss is number one not because it is a perfect film, it isn't. It is number one because it is the moment everything changed, the moment a decade of extraordinary Chinese action cinema announced itself to the world. The moment one man stepped in front of a camera and permanently altered the course of global popular culture. There is before the Big Boss, and there is after. Everything on this list lives in the after. That's the list of the top 20 Chinese action films from the 70s. Looking back across these 20 films, what strikes me most is the sheer diversity of genius packed into a single decade. Bruce Lee redefining what a human body could do on screen. Chang Che building a cinema of brotherhood and sacrifice. Lau Kar Liang honoring authentic martial arts traditions with the precision of a master craftsman. Jackie Chan finding laughter inside the action. And a generation of actors, Ti Lung, Gordon Liu, Chen Quan-tai, and Alexander Fu Sheng, bringing extraordinary commitment to every frame. This was not an accident. This was a cultural explosion, the collision of talent, ambition, timing, and circumstance that produces something truly historic. John Woo absorbed the brotherhood of Chang Che and channeled it into A Better Tomorrow and The Killer. Jet Li carried the Shaolin tradition forward in Once Upon a Time in China. Jackie Chan built an entire career on the comedic action foundations laid in Drunken Master. And Ang Lee looked back at this decade's wuxia tradition and created Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which introduced a new generation of global audiences to the beauty of Chinese action cinema. The 1970s didn't just produce great films. It produced the DNA of Chinese action cinema, and that DNA is still alive in every great martial arts film being made today. If you made it this far, thank you. Please hit like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments, what is your personal number one from the 1970s? Is Bruce Lee your top, or does Shaw Brothers take the crown for you? Next time, we move into the 1980s. Jackie Chan at his absolute peak, Jet Li's explosive debut, John Woo revolutionizing the crime action film, and a filmmaker named Sui Hark changing everything again. You do not want to miss it.